Elias stood in the dim apothecary as the creditors' ink-stained fingers counted every last gold coin from his father's leather satchel. The fortune that had built railroads and broken men alike, now sliding across a scarred wooden counter into a stranger's grasp for a single sealed vial. Arabella, unaware, sat miles away in a shuttered ranch house, tracing the silver-blue map of scars that laced her arms and throat, remnants of a quack cure that had poisoned her blood and turned her own reflection into a prison of shame and searing public ridicule. She had been a debtor to the same ruthless man, her late father's medical experiments leaving her body a living ledger of failure, and Elias had sworn he would free her from that burden, even if it meant exchanging every tangible thing he owned for the intangible alchemy of her healing. The creditor, a gaunt man named Silas Mordecai, grinned as he pushed the vial across the counter and said, "This formula extracts colloidal silver from the dermis, but tell no one it came from me, for the secret would hang us both in the territory's harsh courts." Elias tucked the cool glass against his chest, feeling it pulse with the weight of his obliterated inheritance, and he rode through a moonless night toward Arabella's homestead, the emptiness in his saddlebags a strange, buoyant freedom he had never known before. He rehearsed the lie he would tell her, a story of finding a benevolent doctor who had forgiven her debt and donated the cure, because he needed her to accept the treatment without guilt, without knowing he had immolated his own legacy to ignite her rebirth. When he arrived at dawn, he found her standing at the wash basin, scrubbing her arms with lye soap as if she could scour the silver from her very flesh, and he gently took her raw hands and said, "I've brought a liniment that will truly heal you, Arabella, and it costs you nothing." She searched his face for the transaction hidden behind his eyes, but his gaze was as still and clear as a mountain lake. So she surrendered to hope and let him apply the first cool drops of the tincture to her scarred collarbone with trembling reverence. The treatment spanned 7 agonizing days, during which the silver leached from her skin in shimmering sweat, leaving behind raw, pink, new flesh that felt as tender as the moment before a first kiss, and Elias bathed her shoulders with chamomile compresses while she wept. Each sunrise revealed another patch of restored, healthy skin, the mirror no longer an enemy but a friend returning from a long war, and she began to laugh, a sound that trickled through the ranch house like a creek breaking winter ice, melting the silence. While she healed, Elias rode out each afternoon to dismantle the remains of his estate, selling the mahogany furniture, the crystal decanters, the gold leaf portrait frames, even his mother's pearl brooch, to secure enough coin for the second vial Silas demanded for full reclamation. He told Arabella he was attending to overdue ranch business, and she believed him because her world had shrunk to the miracle of her own vanishing scars and the growing, desperate need to touch the man who had delivered it. On the 7th day, the final application was complete, and Arabella stood naked before a full-length mirror that Elias had dragged from the attic, her skin uniformly olive and radiant, unblemished by any trace of the metallic prison that had encased her for 3 years. She turned to him with a sob that was equal parts joy and aching vulnerability, whispering, "You saw me as whole before I ever did, Elias, and I don't know why you would spend so much time on a woman everyone else called tarnished silverware." He cupped her cheek, now smooth and warm, and replied, "There was never any tarnish to me, only a light that had been trapped beneath a layer of the world's cruelty, waiting for the right solvent to set it free into the visible spectrum of human sight." That night, Arabella decided to thank him by cooking a lavish meal. So she walked to the town market with her head held high for the first time in years, her basket swinging as neighbors stared not with revulsion, but with confused admiration at her glowing skin. At the market, she overheard 2 gossiping women discussing the shocking news that Elias Thornton had gone completely bankrupt, liquidating every asset to settle a mysterious, undisclosed debt, and the town was buzzing with speculation about a secret gambling run or a swindled fortune. Her blood chilled, and the bag of flour slipped from her fingers, shattering on the cobblestones as she realized the timeline matched perfectly with the arrival of the miraculous cure. And suddenly, every kind of vision from Elias's lips reappeared in her memory as a translucent thread of sacrifice. She ran home, her lungs burning, and burst through the door to find Elias mending a bridle with hands that now owned no horses, no land, no gold, just calluses and the quiet, resigned dignity of a man who had banked everything on her wholeness. Breathless, she confronted him, holding up a crumpled notice of his estate sale, and demanded, "Tell me the truth. Did you trade your entire birthright for the secret that healed my scars and erased my debt to that monster Silas Mordecai?" Elias set down the leather, his jaw tightening, and after a long silence he said, "The truth is not a debt you owe me, Arabella, so please let it lie buried where I placed it. For I made the trade freely and would make it 1,000 times over in 1,000 worlds." She fell to her knees before him, grasping his hands and wept, "But I am not worth an ancestral fortune. I am just a woman with damaged skin and a broken history, and now you have impoverished yourself for the mere topography of my body." He lifted her chin with infinite tenderness and spoke the words that would rewrite her understanding of value. "Your skin was never mere topography. It was the map of suffering I could not bear to see you carry alone, and gold is just heavy metal. Your smile restored is the currency of the eternal." The revelation ignited a fire in Arabella's chest, not of guilt but of fierce, protective love, and she resolved to rebuild what he had lost, using the medical knowledge of the cure that she had meticulously documented during her own treatment to help others. She wrote to Silas Mordecai, demanding the formula's origin in exchange for her silence about his shady practices, and the terrified creditor provided the full alchemical recipe, which involved a rare desert plant and a mineral only found in the northern mountains. Together, she and Elias journeyed into the high country to harvest the ingredients, camping under stars that seemed to shine brighter now that her skin could feel the cool night air without the constant sting of silver toxicity poisoning her pores. They established a modest healing clinic in a remote canyon, advertising discreetly to those afflicted by argyria and other disfiguring conditions. And soon a trickle of desperate souls arrived, their bodies marred by quack remedies and industrial poisons, seeking restoration. Elias managed the clinic's humble finances, finding a new purpose in stretching every penny to purchase supplies. And Arabella discovered a profound gift for diagnosing and treating skin ailments, her own scars the credential that earned the instant trust of every trembling patient. Word of the clinic spread, and a wealthy mine owner whose daughter had been turned blue by silver dust offered them a significant stake in a new medical enterprise. But Elias refused any arrangement that would compromise the clinic's mission of serving the destitute and hopeless. Instead, they accepted only enough funding to keep the lanterns lit and the vials full, and the clinic became known as the House of Unsilvered Dawn, a sanctuary where worth was measured, not in coin but in the number of scars tenderly erased. One evening, as Elias inventoried the supplies, Arabella found the satchel where he kept the single gold coin he had saved a worn Spanish doubloon that had belonged to his grandfather, the last tangible link to his ancestry, and she understood the depth of what he had voluntarily surrendered. She took the coin to a jeweler in secret and had it fashioned into a pendant engraved with their intertwined initials and the date of her complete healing, then hung it around his neck one moonless night and said, "This is the only gold that matters now, because it carries a promise instead of a price." He pulled her close, and for the first time since the sacrifice, he allowed himself to weep, his tears soaking into her newly healed skin, and she held him until the storm passed, realizing that she had become his sanctuary just as surely as he had become her cure. Years passed, and the clinic thrived, its reputation built on the radical premise that human dignity is the primary currency of any just economy. And they trained apprentices who carried the formula to distant territories, erasing the silvery signatures of suffering across the frontier. Elias's hair grayed early from the toil, but his eyes never lost the fierce contentment of a man who had discovered that poverty chosen for love is the richest estate a soul can inherit, and he walked the canyon paths with Arabella's hand clasped firmly in his own. A journalist from an eastern city arrived to document the strange phenomenon of a couple who had deliberately descended from wealth to obscurity, and when he asked Elias about regret, the old man replied, "Regret is what I would have felt watching her hide in shadows. I only wish I'd traded the gold sooner." Arabella, now a poised and radiant woman with only faint silvery threads visible under certain light threads she wore as medals, added, "He didn't lose a fortune. He transformed it into living flesh, into the ability of a woman to stand in sunlight without flinching. And that is an investment with an eternal dividend." The journalist's article spread across the nation, and donations flooded in, which they used to build a larger hospital wing. But Elias insisted on keeping a plaque that read, "Founded on the sale of one man's gold and the reclamation of one woman's skin, proving that true wealth is the restoration of the human image." The creditor, Silas, eventually faced justice for unrelated crimes, and on the day of his sentencing, Arabella visited his cell not to gloat but to offer him the formula for free, saying, "Even you deserve a chance to heal whatever corrosion turned your heart to counting silver and ignoring souls." Silas wept, the first genuine emotion he had displayed in decades, and he asked for her forgiveness, which she granted with the quiet authority of a woman who had stared into the abyss of worthlessness and returned carrying a torch for every prisoner still trapped there. On the 30th anniversary of her healing, Arabella woke early and walked alone to the high ridge where they had once harvested the rare desert plant, now cultivated in a greenhouse below, and she watched the sunrise paint the canyon walls in hues of gold and rose. Elias joined her, moving a bit slower now, and he sat on a rock beside her, taking her hand as he said, "I have never owned a single acre since that day, but I possess everything that matters because your unscarred hand still reaches for mine in the darkness." She leaned her head on his shoulder and replied, "You bought back my very existence, and I've spent every day since trying to prove that the price you paid was not a loss, but a seed planted in the soil of human need, yielding a harvest that outshines all the bullion in the world's coffers." The clinic, now a sprawling institution, was handed over to a new generation of healers they had trained, and Arabella and Elias retired to a small cabin at the edge of the property, its walls lined with jars of the precious plant extract and the little gold pendant still around his neck. They grew vegetables and tended a few horses, and every morning Arabella would stand in the doorway with her sleeves pushed up, letting the sun trace the faint, nearly invisible lines that remained, reciting to herself the truth that scars are not shame, but sacred calligraphy of survival. Elias would watch her and marveled that the same woman who had once scrubbed herself raw now embraced the light so unself-consciously, her skin a testament to the chemical and emotional alchemy that had bonded them more tightly than any marriage vow or share bank account ever could. One evening, a young woman with fresh silver scars arrived at the gate, sobbing and suicidal, and Arabella brought her inside, washed her wounds, and whispered, "Someone once traded a mountain of gold for my scars, and now I offer you the same cure without cost, because you are priceless." The young woman's transformation mirrored Arabella's own, and as she left the clinic months later with clear skin and a straightened spine, she told them, "You didn't just heal my body. You taught me that my worth was never stored in my appearance, but in the indelible image of my soul." Elias, hearing those words, turned to Arabella and said, "That is the compound interest on our original investment, compounding forever in the ledgers of heaven, where the gold we gave away is still multiplying as redeemed human beings walking upright into their futures." They died within a year of each other, peacefully and surrounded by the extended family of grateful patients who had become an unbreakable community, and their ashes were mixed together and scattered on the ridge where the rare plant grew wild and free in the desert wind. A statue was erected in the town square, not of their faces, but of two open hands, one pouring out a stream of gold coins, the other cradling a smooth, unblemished piece of flesh, and the inscription read, "Here the currency of dignity was minted for all who would receive it without price." The formula they had guarded was eventually published in a medical journal with the note, "Discovered through the sacrifice of Elias Thornton and the healing of Arabella Vance, for the public good, and in defiance of all who would commodify human suffering for private gain." Every year, on the anniversary, a gathering of the healed would take place at the Ridge, and they would tell the story of the man who traded his gold for a woman's scars. A narrative that grew in power with each retelling until it became a foundational myth of the territory's ethical imagination. And in the unseen realm beyond time, Elias's empty satchel was filled with a treasure no thief could steal, and Arabella's luminous skin reflected a light that owed nothing to the sun, because they had discovered that the only wealth that survives death is love exchanged in the currency of sacrifice. Their legacy endures in every clinic that treats the disfigured with dignity, in every medical student who refuses to patent a life-saving formula, and in every human being who looks in the mirror at a scarred body and declares, "I am not a debt to be paid, but a gift to be unwrapped." So the hidden truth behind Arabella's debt became the visible truth of an entire region's transformation. And the gold that Elias poured out did not vanish, but metamorphosed into a river of healing that still flows through the veins of the brokenhearted, restoring the image of the divine in every willing soul. If this story moved your heart, please subscribe to Stories Hub Official. Give it a like, and tell us in the comments what sacrifice you would make to restore someone's dignity, because your words might inspire the next tale of redemption.